The moment my brother Michael proudly announced his $100,000 year-end bonus, preening under the adoring gaze of my parents, they had absolutely no idea that their supposedly struggling and disappointing daughter, was the one who had personally approved that exact payment as his CEO. It was Thanksgiving, a day traditionally dedicated to gratitude. But in the Miller household, it had always been an annual showcase for generational favoritism, and I, Emily, was always the foil. The rich aroma of butter and sage turkey and my mother, Laura's famous pecan pie, did little to mask the bitter undercurrent of the conversation at the antique mahogany dining table in suburban Chicago. Michael, impeccably dressed in a new Italian wool suit that I knew he couldn't actually afford on his declared salary, leaned back in his chair, basking in the spotlight. "Yeah, Dad, it's a six-figure lump sum, hitting my account next week," he repeated, his voice just loud enough to cut through the polite dinner chatter. "Omnicorp Tech is soaring, and the CEO? She's a total shark, ruthless but brilliant. She decided to reward the top 5% of performers with a cut of the Q4 profits. A real game changer for my portfolio." My father, James, didn't just beam, he practically glowed with vicarious achievement. His face, usually set in lines of paternal worry over my perceived lack of stability, was now relaxed and smug. "That's my boy," he said, patting Michael's shoulder with unrestrained pride. "That's real success, Emily. Tangible. Security. Michael has the backbone for the big leagues. Unlike the artsy startups you were dabbling in back in San Francisco." He didn't need to finish the thought. The entire brutal sentiment was there. Michael was the investment that paid off. I was the sunk cost, the quiet disappointment. Michael, seizing the moment, turned to me, his smirk widening into a condescending smile. "It's a tough environment, Em. The CEO, they say she's a zero-tolerance type. No room for error. You really gotta hustle and show undeniable value to keep up. It's not all remote work and creative branding in the C-suite, right? It's meritocracy at its most unforgiving." The comment was a direct, calculated jab at the painful period in my mid-20s when my first two tech ventures collapsed, a time they had openly mocked to friends and neighbors. This Thanksgiving wasn't just a slight. It was a public execution of my financial reputation, orchestrated by a brother who had always taken the path of least resistance. My mother, never one to miss an opportunity to reinforce the hierarchy, chimed in, "Well, we're just relieved Michael is finally settled, Emily. A $100,000 bonus. Maybe you should consider applying for a more administrative, stable role at a big company like Omnicorp, dear. Michael could put in a good word for you." The casual cruelty, the suggestion that I, who had built my career from the ground up, should seek employment under my brother's patronage, was the final insult. They thought they had me beat, silenced, relegated to the sidelines of their success story. I felt the familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach, a physical manifestation of 2 decades of being systematically overlooked. I maintained perfect composure, however, the result of years spent mastering the art of the poker face in high-stakes boardroom negotiations. My cousin Sarah, my only true ally and co-conspirator who was seated across the table, gave me a sharp, questioning look. I just gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Not yet. I calmly finished cutting a piece of my turkey, observing the scene with the detached eye of a CEO reviewing inadequate performance. My parents were beaming, utterly convinced of Michael's superiority and my subservient role. They had no idea they were sitting at a table with the woman who held the ultimate corporate and financial leverage over both their lives. The irony was so rich it felt almost intoxicating. I waited until Michael took another self-satisfied drink of water, signaling the pause in his performance. I reached for the sleek, obsidian black portfolio I had set discreetly beside my chair, which they probably assumed contained a planner or a sketch pad, and pulled out a single, thin, white document. The paper was heavy stock, subtly bearing the embossed Omnicorp logo. "Michael, that's genuinely good news," I said, my voice quiet, professional, and precise. you are indeed a very good mid-level developer, and $100,000 is a considerable sum." The tension in the room ratcheted up immediately. My parents frowned, sensing a deviation from the script where I was supposed to express humbling awe. Michael looked nervous, his smugness momentarily challenged by my unexpected professionalism. I slid the document across the table, past the centerpiece of autumn squash and candles, letting it land with a soft thwack directly in front of Michael. "Speaking of that very demanding CEO at Omnicorp," I continued, letting a small surgical smile appear on my face, "there's one last piece of standard HR paperwork required to clear a bonus of that magnitude. It's an internal, non-disclosure and transfer agreement. It just needs your final signature before the payment is processed on Monday." Michael picked it up, his brow furrowed with confusion and caution. The document was titled, "Executive Performance Mandate and Geographical Relocation Consent." His eyes scanned the signature block, and then he saw it. The name of the authorizing officer, Emily Rose Miller. Directly underneath was the title, Chief Executive Officer. The room fell into an immediate, shocking silence, broken only by the distant clatter of a fork hitting a plate in the kitchen. My father sputtered, "Emily, what is this? A cheap parlor trick? Are you trying to throw shade on your brother's achievement with some kind of joke?" I met Michael's eye. His face, once triumphant, was now a mask of ashen terror. He dropped the document as if it had suddenly become toxic. "No joke, Dad," I confirmed, letting the cold reality settle over them like a deep winter frost. "I am, and have been for the last 9 months, the CEO of Omnicorp Tech. Michael reports 3 layers up my organizational chart. I am the ruthless shark who personally signed off on his $100,000 bonus and, consequently, approved his mandatory transfer to our new high-demand facility in Austin, Texas, effective January 1st. Read the fine print, Michael. Accepting the bonus means accepting the relocation. Refusing the transfer means immediate voluntary termination and the activation of a highly restrictive 6-month non-compete clause." I paused, letting the full force of the revelation, the sudden brutal inversion of our familial power structure, wash over them. They thought they had me beat, but I was playing chess while they were playing checkers. That moment changed everything. To understand the decade of cold, patient planning that led to this single devastating checkmate, one must look back at the root of the Miller family's sickness, the persistent structural cruelty of selective love. Our story began not in Chicago, but in the sun-bleached suburbs of Dallas, Texas. Michael, older by 2 years, was the celebrated golden child from birth. My parents, James and Laura, had struggled financially during my early years, and Michael's arrival coincided with James landing a stable, well-paying job. The narrative they subconsciously created was that Michael was the harbinger of prosperity, while I was simply an inevitable side effect of their early hardship. This wasn't just favoritism, it was a cruel, systemic preference that determined my entire trajectory. When Michael expressed a vague interest in computers in middle school, my father immediately cleared out the small den to create a command center for him, purchasing the most expensive desktop and software available. When I, at the same age, spent months meticulously drawing up blueprints for a community garden project that won a local environmental award, my father's only comment was, "That's sweet, Emily, but can you move your papers? Michael needs space for his new coding textbook." My academic achievements, my quiet ambition, and my profound emotional intelligence were consistently deemed nice, but ultimately irrelevant to their idea of real success, which was always defined by immediate, quantifiable, and masculine-coded wealth accumulation. The ultimate betrayal occurred when I was 18, accepted into Stanford with a full academic scholarship to study engineering. I was ecstatic. Michael was finishing his first unremarkable year at the state university closer to home. However, my father's small commercial construction business was failing, crippled by the 2008 recession. I was packing my bags when my parents called me into the living room for a solemn talk. "We need you to stay, Emily," my mother had said, her eyes wet with manipulative tears. "Michael needs stability right now. He needs the house and the comfort of knowing we're okay while he finishes his degree. If you go to Stanford, we'll have to sell the house to cover our debt." They didn't need me to earn money. They needed me to be the self-sacrificing, compliant anchor that allowed Michael to pursue his destiny. I was forced to call Stanford and defer, only to eventually lose the scholarship because I couldn't meet the enrollment deadline. I stayed in Dallas, attended a local community college, and eventually secured a modest degree in business administration, all while watching Michael thrive on the financial and emotional capital I had been forced to forego. When I finally left Texas at 23, heading to San Francisco with a desperate hope of joining the tech boom, my parents presented me with a final, painful gift. A check for $5,000. "This is everything we can give you, Emily. We're sorry," my father said. But I later discovered the brutal truth. They had just used their emergency savings to buy Michael a down payment for a brand new luxury SUV for his commute in Chicago. The $5,000 I received was a humiliating pittance, a token payment meant to salve their conscience, while Michael received the true, generous investment. That was the turning point. I realized their cruelty wasn't personal, it was institutional. It was a failure of character that was so deeply ingrained it was irreversible. I swore an oath to myself. I would never again allow my fate to be determined by their emotional currency or their financial neglect. I would pursue absolute, undeniable power. My years in San Francisco were relentless, mirroring the gritty, determined spirit of the early California gold rush. I lived in a terrible apartment and worked 3 jobs, clawing my way into the startup world. I worked in operations, the back end, the unglamorous part of the business that ensured the flashy apps actually worked. I learned how money moved, how legal structures were manipulated, and how to spot a financial fraud from a mile away. I was a digital detective, thriving on complexity and chaos. My big break came when I identified a massive, structural vulnerability in the financial architecture of a major tech firm, Synapse, and presented the solution directly to the board. They didn't just hire me, they made me a VP of Global Operations, demanding that I relocate to New York City to lead the overhaul. This was where the real money and power resided, far from the sentimental, controlling orbit of my family. I made millions, quietly, efficiently, leveraging stock options and complex financial instruments. I bought a stunning apartment in the financial district, overlooking the Hudson River. But I never advertised my wealth. When my parents asked what I did, I would simply say, "I work in corporate efficiency. It's quite dry." They happily accepted this narrative, as it kept me firmly in Michael's shadow, who by then had secured a mid-level coding job at Omnicorp Tech in Chicago and was constantly sending them pictures of his expensive watches and loud public happy hours. The foundation of my revenge was laid 3 years ago when I made my most crucial strategic move. I met and befriended Linda Chen, the founder and then CEO of Omnicorp Tech. Linda, an iron-willed woman who had immigrated to the US and built her empire from scratch, saw a kindred spirit in my quiet, focused ambition. I spent a year as her confidential external consultant, advising on the massive global restructuring she was undertaking. I impressed her not with my coding skills, but with my ability to see the chess game 5 moves ahead, to predict corporate political shifts and financial pitfalls. When Linda decided to step down due to mounting health issues, she didn't just promote me, she groomed me, ensuring I took over as CEO with the unanimous approval of the board. The announcement was highly confidential, internal to the C-suite for 9 months, giving me the perfect window to operate in secret. My first act as CEO was the deliberate, quiet acquisition of Michael. I knew Omnicorp was the ultimate prestige for him, the very company he used to brag about. I instructed Jack, my VP of Talent Acquisition, to headhunt Michael based purely on his resume, ensuring Michael was hired without any knowledge of who the new incoming CEO was. He was placed in the Chicago office, which I intentionally kept several layers down the command chain, directly reporting to a regional VP who reported to the CTO, who reported directly to me. He was literally 3 links away from my desk, and he didn't have a clue. The discovery of the cruel financial betrayal that led to the Thanksgiving checkmate happened 6 months ago at a high-end coffee shop in Manhattan. I was meeting with my chief legal officer, Emma, to discuss the acquisition strategy for a small, questionable AI firm called Quantum Leap Ventures. Emma had flagged the company for high-risk securities violations. As we went over the investor list, a familiar name jumped out. James Miller. My father. A secondary check revealed a massive second mortgage on the Chicago house, the very house my parents had given Michael, funding the investment. "This is classic affinity fraud, Emily," Emma explained, stirring her latte. "The founder, a guy named Darren Vance, targets people who feel left out of the Silicon Valley insider game. He promises impossible returns. Your father is going to lose everything, including the house, because the startup is a shell and the SEC is already moving in." I realized then that Michael had done this. He had convinced our father, the man who had always valued Michael's financial prowess above my own proven, measurable success, to risk everything on a dangerous lie. He was so desperate to uphold the illusion of his superiority that he didn't care who he took down with him. I saw the email thread later, Michael confidently assuring James that this was his American dream moment, securing their retirement. This wasn't just neglect. It was catastrophic, self-serving deception. That moment of discovery was the definitive end of my patience. I realized that my revenge could not just be professional. It had to be salvational. I would save them from Michael's recklessness, but I would use the act of salvation to permanently dismantle the family's toxic power dynamic, making myself the indispensable, terrifyingly powerful creditor. I decided the Thanksgiving confrontation had to serve 2 purposes: reveal the CEO status for maximum public humiliation and reveal the note purchase for total financial subjugation. The $100,000 bonus and the mandatory transfer to Austin were simply the corporate handcuffs necessary to ensure Michael couldn't simply quit in a fit of rage and immediately start bad-mouthing the company. The transfer agreement included strict, non-negotiable clauses about corporate honesty and ethical conduct, clauses I was prepared to enforce immediately. The day before Thanksgiving, I sent Michael the corporate email detailing the bonus and the transfer protocol. I included a subtle reference to the Omnicorp Code of Conduct, knowing he would be too excited by the 6-figure bonus to actually read the 10-page legal addendum. I flew to Chicago, not to see my family, but to meet David at a luxury hotel downtown, where we finalized the last of the promissory notes and the foreclosure deferment agreement. I was prepared for war, armed with ironclad legal documents and cold, righteous certainty. Back at the Miller dining table, the silence stretched, excruciating and thick, after my bombshell revelation. Michael, his face pale and slick with cold sweat, was frantically scrolling through his phone, hoping my email was a cleverly disguised spam or phishing attempt. When he saw the official Omnicorp headers, the CEO signature line, and the undeniable reality of his predicament, his phone clattered against the antique serving platter, sending the gravy boat teetering precariously. This is a conflict of interest," Michael stammered, pulling out the only corporate phrase he could remember. "You can't do this! You're my sister! You can't dictate where I live!" "Oh, but I can, Michael," I corrected him calmly, picking up the fallen phone and placing it gently back on the table. "I can, because the moment you accepted employment at Omnicorp, you waived your right to contest transfers critical to the company's operational demands. And as the CEO and largest individual shareholder, I have zero conflict of interest. I have only an interest in meritocracy and efficiency. Furthermore, your attempt to deceive the family about your role and your recklessness in encouraging Dad's investment in a known Ponzi scheme constitutes gross corporate and ethical misconduct." My mother, Laura, ever the defender of the golden boy, finally erupted, her voice shaking with outrage. "Emily, you have no right to interfere in our finances. You just admitted you're rich. Why are you being so mean? What about family?" "Mean?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound that held zero humor. "Mom, Michael's investment is about to collapse. Quantum Leap Ventures is facing a massive SEC fraud investigation, which Omnicorp's legal team was instrumental in initiating, due to the sheer scale of their market manipulation. You and Dad are about to lose every dime you put in, and since Dad put up the house as collateral, you were facing foreclosure on the home you love so much. The very home I was guilt-tripped out of so Michael could have stability." I reached into my briefcase again, pulling out a small sealed envelope containing the notarized deed of trust and the debt cancellation documents. "I'm not being mean, Mom. I'm being strategic. 6 weeks ago, I purchased the second mortgage note from your bank through a legal proxy. I now hold the lien on the house. David is filing the papers on Monday to officially pay off both your and Dad's fraudulent investment with my personal funds, money I earned from actual tangible success, not fabricated lies." My father, James, looked utterly defeated, the realization of his and Michael's shared financial incompetence hitting him simultaneously. He stared at the deed documents in front of Michael, his pride completely dismantled. "The house. We lose the house?" he whispered, his voice broken. "No," I replied, my voice hard but definitive. "You don't. Because, unlike Michael, I am actually capable of providing security. I am legally going to pay off the note, cancel the foreclosure, and transfer the house ownership to both you and Mom as joint tenants, ensuring Michael can never sell it out from under you again. The condition? You will both sign this final document, a 3-year, zero-interest personal promissory note that legally binds you and Michael to repay the exact amount you lost in that fraudulent scheme. You will repay me, starting in January, for the next 3 years. You will learn the true value of money, and Michael will learn the true cost of his deception. He signs the promissory note, and he signs the Austin transfer. Or, I file the foreclosure papers on Monday, and you lose everything. The choice is simple. The weight of my power, not just corporate, but financial and moral, was crushing. Michael was trapped, forced to accept the humiliation of working for me, and forced to financially pay for his own recklessness, all while saving his parents' retirement. He grabbed the pen, his hand shaking with impotent fury, and signed both the transfer agreement and the promissory note, his signature a frantic, messy scrawl. I collected the documents and placed them back in my briefcase. "Thank you. Payments will be debited on the 15th of every month. Enjoy the pie." The dinner was over. The years of quiet abuse had finally culminated in a public, surgical dismantling of their entire reality. I was the one who was supposed to be asking for money. Now I was the bank, the landlord, and the boss. The aftermath of Thanksgiving was characterized by an unnerving silence. My parents, James and Laura, were subdued, contacting me only to confirm the details of the debt repayment plan. They were caught between gratitude for saving their home and paralyzing fear of my power. Michael, however, was simmering. He called me repeatedly, trying to negotiate, to manipulate, to appeal to a sisterly bond that had never existed. "Emily, this Austin thing is a punishment. It's a bad look for me. I need to stay in Chicago for my network," he pleaded one afternoon on a call I took in my New York corner office, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. "It's not a punishment, Michael. It's a mandatory transfer to a high-demand compliance role," I explained, scrolling through a quarterly earnings report, my tone utterly devoid of emotion. "You told Mom and Dad you were a financial visionary. Now you get to prove it by spending a year cleaning up the real-world messes made by actual financial criminals. You will report to Jack, our VP of Legal Compliance. He's very strict. He expects 80-hour work weeks and absolute transparency. No more lies, Michael. No more preening. Just results. Otherwise, you know the drill. Termination, non-compete, and immediate full repayment of your share of the promissory note." He hung up in frustrated rage, but he signed the final paperwork. He took the transfer. He had to. The financial leverage was too absolute. He chose to work for me under intense scrutiny, rather than face unemployment and the massive debt he had incurred. My focus now shifted from revenge to release. The checkmate was complete, but I needed to permanently sever the emotional attachment to the conflict. I realized the family drama had become a core part of my identity. A shield, yes, but also a constant toxic weight. The final act needed to be public, not for their humiliation, but for my own closure, solidifying my new, powerful identity in front of the world that mattered to me, my professional peers. I set the stage for the annual Omnicorp Holiday Gala in Manhattan. I instructed my head of PR to make a point of highlighting the new CEO's commitment to corporate ethics and meritocracy during the event. I invited Sarah, flying her in from Boston and putting her up in a penthouse suite. "This is your front row seat to the final curtain call, Sarah," I told her over drinks the night before. "I need to speak my truth in a space they can't touch, in a way they can't deny. I'm claiming my narrative." The night of the gala, the ballroom was a spectacle of wealth and power, a high-stakes networking event where millions in deals were often brokered over champagne. Michael, forced to attend as a high-performing transfer candidate, looked utterly miserable. He avoided my eye, keeping to the periphery, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous, twitchy subservience. I took the stage precisely at 9 p.m., dressed in a sleek, custom-made gown that radiated quiet authority. I stood at the podium, surrounded by flashing cameras and the expectant faces of the most powerful people in tech. I delivered the expected corporate address, praising the company's growth and vision. Then, I reached the pivotal moment. This year, we saw unprecedented growth, which is a testament to the hard work of every employee. I began, letting my eyes sweep the crowd until I locked onto Michael, standing near the bar. It's also a testament to one specific core value, meritocracy. The belief that results, not connections or inherited privilege, determine your worth. I paused, and the entire ballroom went silent, sensing the shift in tone. This commitment to meritocracy means we have zero tolerance for dishonesty, self-aggrandizement, or financial recklessness. It means that everyone, from the newest intern to the most seasoned executive, must be held accountable. And if that accountability involves family, so be it. I focused directly on Michael. Earlier this year, Michael Miller, an employee I personally approved for transfer to our new anti-fraud and compliance division in Austin, boasted about a $100,000 bonus, receiving immense personal and familial praise for his supposed financial genius. What he failed to mention was that I, Emily Rose Miller, the CEO standing here, signed the approval. And what he failed to mention was that his supposed financial genius led my parents to invest their entire retirement in a fraudulent scheme that I had to personally and legally dismantle, using my own money, to save their home from foreclosure. The sound of hundreds of gasps was audible. The public exposure was immediate and total. This wasn't just corporate gossip. This was a CEO exposing a fundamental, ugly truth about the intersection of family privilege and corporate performance. Michael, your bonus and your new role are not rewards for competence. They are opportunities for education, I stated, my voice ringing with cold authority. You will spend the next year under the strictest legal oversight, learning the real cost of corporate dishonesty, a cost that nearly destroyed my parents and invalidated the hard-won success of your colleagues. This company demands authenticity, and you will now be forced to deliver it. I concluded the speech with a powerful pivot. We are the new guard. We value the quiet hustlers, the resilient builders, the ones who create value despite the systems designed to hold them down. Michael is now part of the educational process that proves that rule. Let's raise a glass not to false idols, but to hard-won, undeniable merit. The crowd erupted in a massive, energized roar. My public, undeniable statement was made. I didn't speak to Michael again. He left the gala immediately, his disgrace complete. I had used my corporate stage to execute the final act of my personal liberation. Within a month, I made my final, decisive move. I resigned as CEO of Omnicorp Tech. My mentor, Linda, was disappointed but understood. You were meant to fix things, Emily, not rule forever. You found your peace, she told me warmly. My accumulated stock options and wealth from my tenure were staggering. More money than my entire family could generate in 3 generations. I was financially free, and now, emotionally free. My journey took me away from the manic energy of New York and the suffocating environment of Chicago. I moved to the stunning, rugged landscape of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I traded the glass towers for the Grand Teton Mountains and the endless meetings for quiet, focused work. I bought a sprawling ranch property and founded Ascend Fund, a venture capital firm dedicated exclusively to funding and mentoring women and minority-led businesses who, like me, had been overlooked, underestimated, or actively sabotaged by traditional gatekeepers. My father, James, called one last time after I announced my resignation from Omnicorp. He sounded genuinely remorseful and humble. Emily, I saw the news. You saved us, and then you gave up everything. Why? I gave up a job, Dad, not everything, I replied, standing on my ranch porch, the vast, silent wilderness stretching out before me, the air crisp and clean. The money is still here. The power is still mine. I created a life where I choose who to save and who to elevate, based purely on merit and integrity. That's the kind of power that truly matters. I reaffirmed the debt repayment schedule. They were now consistently making their payments to Ascend Fund's accounting department, and politely but firmly ended the conversation, closing the chapter on their emotional demands forever. 6 months later, Sarah flew out to visit, driving a rental SUV across the scenic Route 66 to reach me. We sat by a roaring fire pit outside my ranch house, watching the stars blaze impossibly bright in the clear mountain air. "You really did it, Em," Sarah marveled, sipping a glass of Napa Valley Cabernet. "You didn't just get revenge, you leveraged their cruelty into a launch pad. You saved them from their own son but made them pay you back. It's beautiful, ruthless justice." "It was never about the money, Sarah. It was about defining my own worth," I reflected, watching the embers glow. They judged my life on Michael's $100K bonus, and I responded by proving I controlled the multi-billion-dollar company that issued it. I used the money they so desperately worshipped to buy my way out of their control and into a future entirely defined by my own vision. I had not only broken the mold of the unappreciated daughter, but I had forged a new path entirely, one built on accountability, authenticity, and profound independence. I had taken my shot, successfully rebuilt my life, and now I stood on the edge of a new, majestic mountain range, ready to elevate others who deserved the chance I was nearly denied. I was the architect of my own destiny, and the toxic drama of the past was now just a silent, forgotten debt that would eventually be repaid, leaving me completely and gloriously free.